Hey guys, tonight we drift back to a dusty hill above the Sea of Galilee, where you wake up on a mat stuffed with straw and covered in a half-itchy, half-soft linen blanket. The sun is just cracking open the horizon, and the first thing you notice isn't the golden shimmer over the water, it's the smell of flatbread warming over fire-blackened stone. Smoke curls lazily through a hole in the ceiling. Somewhere nearby, a goat sneezes. Welcome to breakfast in honest century Judea, where carbs are king and nobody has invented coffee yet. You're going to miss that part. You probably won't survive this diet, to be honest, but we'll make it tasty on the way down. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge barefoot across the packed dirt floor, careful not to trip over the terracotta jug your sister left in the doorway again. Outside, the fire's already alive. A wide, round stone your family's griddle sits in its usual nest of ash and blackened twigs. On it, a few discs of dough hiss and puff ever so slightly, radiating a warmth that smells like toasty flour, a little like smoke, and a lot like home. This is kick-our flatbread. It's not your average supermarket pita. It's denser, chewier, maybe even a little scorched at the edges depending on who cooked it. The dough's just flour, water, and a bit of sour starter kept in a jar under the shelf. This region doesn't mess with fancy baking powders. Most days you eat this bread for breakfast, dipped into olive oil, or spread with a soft cheese made from sheep's milk. Occasionally there's honey, but that's a festival treat. Your family's flour came from wheat, stone ground, at a mill run by some cranky uncle who still believes windmills are sorcery. Wheat is the prize, crope everyone wants it, but barley is what the poorer folks eat. It's tougher, lower in gluten, and honestly tastes like someone whispered bread to a handful of damp rocks. But it fills the belly. Barley's also what you feed to animals, and sometimes your kids, if times are tight. Historians still argue whether wheat or barley was more culturally symbolic. At the time, some suggest wheat represented status, while barley was for the masses, especially during feast sacrifices at the temple. But in your little northern village, status doesn't keep your stomach from growling. You just eat what grows. Your mother ladles goat milk from a skin into a cup for you. It's fresh, still warm. Honest and little grassy. There's no refrigeration, so you either drink it fast or turn it into something that won't curdle in the sun. Goat yogurt, cheese, and even clarified butter, called smen, all make regular appearances, depending on how far you are from Roman taxation this season. Breakfast quick, not lazy. You've got chores digging ditches, walking miles for kindling, dodging Roman patrols who think your tunic is 1 denarius too clean. A few times a week, someone brings back egg squale, mostly. Chickens around, sure, but they're not really the egg-laying machines we know today. The occasional egg is a bonus, not a staple. Your neighbor, who swears she once saw Elijah in a thundercloud, grinds fava beans on a heavy basalt slab. She's preparing a sort of mash for lunch, but sometimes scoops a bit into the early meal. It's earthy, savory, and a bit suspicious if it's been sitting out too long. You've had food poisoning once from bad legumes, and now you sniff everything like a desert fox. By mid-morning, you've got crumbs in your beard and olive oil under your nails. You're not full, exactly, but you're fueled. The ancient Israeli breakfast isn't built to stuff you. It's built to get you through till the figs ripen or the fish start biting. You chew slowly, watching the sky turn from rose to blue, listening to the distant thud of someone threshing grain on a stone floor. One old guy in the village claims he still uses a wooden sickle to cut his wheat, even though Roman blades are faster. He insists it's more righteous. No one questions him, also believes cats are demon spies. The fields around you are everything. In spring, they ripple like golden lakes under wind. In harvest, they buzz with scythes and barefoot kids dodging snakes. And in lean years, they look like desert with stage fright. People talk to their crops, pray for them, curse them. One guy once tried blessing his barley by burying a tiny copy of a psalm under each row. Didn't help. He ended up with mold and a very expensive rodent problem. What you don't have in this ancient breakfast buffet is variety. No tomatoes, no corn, no potatoes. None of the post-Columbian goodies that make our modern meals sing. Your flavors come from local herbs: wild thyme, za'atar, mint, sumac. If you're lucky, your family has a small clay pot of sesame seeds or a jar of salt dragged from the Dead Sea. Oh, and salt? It's currency. Literally. If you have enough of it, you can trade for olives, fish, even favors from Roman soldiers who pretend they're not bribable. They are. It's getting hotter now. The sun climbs higher, the flies get more ambitious, and the smell of something slightly burned tells you your sister's left the bread too long again. you sigh. But hay scraped off flatbread still tastes better than another morning of barley mash. As you rinse your hands in a cracked jug, you hear the call of your cousin returning from the shoreline. Fish. He's got fish. And suddenly your stomach has room again. By midday, the sun has climbed straight overhead like a nosy landlord checking on your chores. You're walking down toward the edge of the Sea of Galilee, sandals kicking up little puffs of pale dust. It's hot, and the kind of humid that makes your tunic cling in places you'd rather not talk about. But you're not here for a swim. You're here for lunch swim. The shoreline smells like wet rope and fish guts, and someone's always yelling. A trader on the left accuses someone of watering down his brine. A teenage boy to your right tries to pass off yesterday's catch as just shy. You duck under a low-hanging net and nearly take an octopus to the face. Nobody around here has heard of a health department, but business is booming. Fish isn't just food, it's currency, gossip, and survival. You squat near your cousin who's gutting a pile of tilapia with a small curved knife that used to be sharper. The blood mixes with salt water and sand at his feet. He hands you a fish and you start scraping scales with a shard of pottery. Not exactly Michelin star cuisine prep, but it works. Most of these fish tilapia, sardines, the occasional mysterious wriggler caught in the early morning, salted by noon and traded by sundown. Salting is essential. There's no ice, no fridges, no plastic wrap. Salted fish becomes your midday snack, your dinner protein, your travel rations, even your neighbor's birthday present if you're low on figs. And then there's the fermented stuff. Yes garum, or in Hebrew, shikkush. A chunky, nose-wrinkling fish paste made from guts and tiny fish mashed together and left in jars to rot politely in the sun. The result? A savory, umami-rich sauce that you drizzlier, let's be honest. Dab cautiously on flatbread or lentils. Romans love it. Some locals swear by it. Most kids pretend to like it, and then run behind the olive press to gag in peace. Historians still argue whether garum was as widely used in Israel as in Rome. Some think Jewish dietary laws kept it at bay, while others say there were kosher versions, gutless maybe. One theory suggests that a spiced version, made from fermented locusts, briefly trended in Jerusalem, but, taste is subjective. As you help your cousin sort through the morning's catch, you notice something odd. A Roman official buying fish from a grizzled old man who hasn't smiled since the Maccabees. They're arguing over the price of a salted carp. The Roman offers 2 copper coins. The old man spits and holds up 3 fingers. It's a standoff. You chew a strip of dried sardine while watching this unfold like it's a street play. The salted fish trade is big business. In fact, the town of Magdalahust over the hill has its own processing center with stone vats, brining pools, and a whole team of scowling women who can gut fish faster than you can blink. Some archaeologists even found fish bones embedded in floors, like confetti from ancient seafood parties. You finish your snack and wander toward the stalls. Some vendors sell pickled fish heads, don't ask. Others offer a stew made of dried fish, barley gruel, and a mystery spice that might be crushed locust wing. It's filling and surprisingly decent if you hold your nose during the first bite. There's also a rumor that fishermen once used pomegranate rind to flavor fish stews, but only if they were trying to impress someone, like your cousin is doing now, eyeing a girl selling vinegar-soaked olives with fishy fingers and an awkward smile. Your own lunch today is modest. A few dried sardines wrapped in barley flatbread, a smear of fig paste for sweetness, and a few olives that you definitely didn't borrow from your neighbor's tree. You find a shady rock near the water and eat, while watching someone try to wrangle an eel into a clay pot. The eel wins. Around you, lunch looks similar for everyone. Fish, flatbread, pickled stuff, maybe a few vegetables if someone remembered to water the garden this week. There are no plates. Everything's shared. You tear, you dip, you pass. And you try not to get sand in your food fail. The sea is life here. Its rhythms dictate your meals, your market prices, and your sleep schedule. Kids grow up tying knots before they can write. Women know 50 ways to clean scales. Old fishermen can predict a storm by the itch in their kneecap. And when food is scarce inland, the fish trade feeds half the region. But it's not all noble toil and salty snacks. Some fish are taboo. Shellfish, unclean. Eels, suspicious. And let's not even get started on sea creatures that look like someone mashed a snake and a spatula together. Jewish dietary law shapes what you catch, how you cook it, and even what nets you're allowed to use. No bottom feeders, no creepy tentacle things. If it makes you say, ew, it's probably not kosher. Still, the diet here is protein-rich and brimming with omega-3s. Jesus' disciples were mostly fishermen, and not just by coincidence. Fish was portable, tradable, and nutritious. And let's not forget that famous miracle 5 loaves and 2 fish feeding a crowd. You joke sometimes that it was probably more like 2 dried sardines and some crusty bread ends, but hey divine catering. Back at your house, your aunt is boiling water in a blackened pot, tossing in onions, fish scraps, and herbs. Tonight's stew. It'll simmer all afternoon, absorbing every salty, fishy whisper from the sea. You'll eat it with crusty bread, maybe a splash of sour wine, and definitely someone's boring story about how the fish used to be bigger. The sun starts to dip just slightly, casting gold over the water. Seagulls scream like angry spirits overhead. You stretch, your belly pleasantly full, and start the uphill walk home with a pouch of smoked fish tied to your belt. Tomorrow, you might trade it for lentils, or maybe use it to bribe the temple scribe for a favor. Because in this world, fish is more than lunch its language. Your legs ache a little as you climb the hillside path home, but your hands still carry the sticky sweetness of figs. They cling to your fingers like ancient glue, and you don't bother wiping it off. It's a delicious kind of mess, one that lingers with the warm scent of sun-ripened fruit. Up ahead, a cluster of fig trees stretches their lazy branches wide, casting lopsided shadows on the rocky path. You detour, of course. No one walks past a fig tree in season without checking if a few ripe ones have split open with syrupy delight. The rules of nature say, if it falls, it's yours. And if it's low enough to grab and no one's watching, well, the Lord sees, but your stomach wins. Figs are the fruit of choice around here. You don't slice them or put them in salads, you just bite in. The outside is soft and slightly fuzzy like a tired peach, and the inside is an explosion of pink seeds and sugar. Sweet, gritty, strangely floral. You eat 3 before you realize your cousin's watching. He grins, tosses you another one, and you both agree that no one tells Grandma. Down in the valley there's a small orchard of date palms. Tall, spiky, slightly menacing trees that look like they could throw shade and punches. Their fruits hang in tight, heavy clusters, sticky and golden brown, like clumps of edible jewels. Harvesting dates is no joke, someone's always falling off the ladder. But they're worth it. Dates keep forever, travel well, and sweeten just about anything. Porridge, wine, even the weird barley puddings you only eat when sick. Some folks mash dates into thick pastes like a proto-energy bar, sometimes mixing in sesame seeds or chopped nuts. A few date traders around here think they invented candy. They might be right. Historians still argue whether dates or figs were the dominant fruit of ancient Israel. Figs were easier to grow, but dates had more prestige, and commercial power. Some say date syrup was once traded by weight in silver. Others insist fig orchards were more common in home gardens. What you know is this: you've never turned down either. Then there's the jujube. You snort at the name because it sounds like something a Roman poet might name his dog. But this tiny red fruit is a local favoritry on the outside, sweet and chewy within. Some call it the poor man's date. Some call it nature's laxative. Everyone agrees it grows everywhere and ends up in everything. You wander through the orchard, barefoot in the dust, hands sticky, teeth pinked from fig juice. The air smells like warm sugar and thyme. Somewhere nearby, kids are using hollow reeds to slurp juice out of pomegranates. The juice stains everything: fingers, tunics, dignity. You once saw a boy try to hide a pomegranate explosion by diving into a goat trough. It didn't work. Pomegranates are showy, complicated, and vaguely violent to open, but they're also sacred, symbolic, packed with seeds that rabbis like to quote as representing the 613 commandments. You personally think that's a bit of a stretch, but Hivory Fruit has its fan club. Your family keeps dried fruits tied up in cloth sacks hanging from the rafters, like little sweet piñatas waiting to be whacked open on long walks or fasting days. Figs, dates, even raisins though grapes, are a gamble. Half the time the grapes are too sour or they've already been turned into wine. Or vinegar pretending to be wine. You pass a stall where an old woman sells fruit wrapped in fig leaves, layered with honey and crushed nuts. It's the closest thing to a pastry you'll get in the century. She grins with 2 teeth and tells you it's blessed by the dew of Mount Hermon. You nod solemnly, mostly because you're not sure if that's a metaphor or a fungal issue. In lean seasons, fruit becomes survival. Figs are dried into cake-stuffed, chewy discs that feel like gnawing on a sweet sandal. Dates become syrup or vinegar. Grapes become raisins, or, if you're bold, wine. And if there's nothing left to eat but fruit and grain, you call it a festival and make up a prayer to go with it. You remember one time, during a drought, when a boy climbed a neighbor's fig tree and accidentally fell into a basket of drying fruit. That incident is now referred to in your village as the Sticky Boy incident. He's still called that. He's 27 now. For kids, fruit is joy. For adults, it's storage, status, and strategy. You overheard two women once argue over whether storing figs in clay jars or wrapped in palm leaves preserved the flavor better. It got heated. Someone threw a prune. Old rivalries die hard. There's also the wild fruit. Syrian mulberries, carob pods, bitter little desert berries that make your tongue go numb. These are survival foods. You only eat them when the regular orchards are empty, or when you lose a bet. One time someone dared you to eat 5 unripe olives straight off the tree. That was a lesson in humility and puckery. Carob. Though carob has potential. It grows like it doesn't care about soil or love, and its pods taste faintly like chocolate if you squint hard and lie to yourself. The locals sometimes grind the pods into flour, mix it with honey, and pass it off as dessert. You call it regret bread. Open debates swirl around whether wild fruits were common in regular diets or just fallback foods for herders and prophets. Some scholars argue that poor families relied heavily on wild-growing plants, especially during Roman grain shortages. Others think wild fruits were mostly animal fodder unless sweetened beyond recognition. You roll another date between your fingers and glance toward the drying racks. Bees hover lazily around a pot of boiling fruit syrup. Someone's experimenting. You've seen them mix fruit with mustard seed, vinegar, and herbs to make a kind of ancient chutney. It's strange, delicious, mildly suspicious. You're into it. Evening starts to tiptoe in as shadows grow longer. You stuff one last fig in your mouth before heading back uphill. The sweetness lingers on your tongue, chasing the salt from lunch and the bread from morning. There's something oddly perfect about the rhythm. Bread at dawn, fish at noon, fruit at dusk. It's not luxurious, but it's alive. Your stomach is happy. Your hands are sticky. Your soul feels fed. Tomorrow, maybe the almonds are ready. By the time the last streaks of pomegranate pink sky fade behind the hills, the stew pot is already bubbling. It sits in the corner of your family courtyard, nestled among cracked clay tiles and the faint scent of burned thyme from last night's fire. You crouch beside it, stirring with a long wooden spoon on end, polished by generations of hands, the other blackened by heat and use. Dinner's coming, and the air smells like home. The stew is thick and simple. Lentils mostly, maybe red if someone splurged at market, more likely brown, peppered with chopped onions, garlic, and whatever herbs your sister grabbed from the yard, probably coriander and a bit of hyssop. The base is water, sometimes soured with vinegar or brightened with wine. You drop in a chunk of yesterday's barley bread to thicken it. Tonight's dinner is less about fireworks, more about survival, warm, filling, repeatable. Prophet stove. You call it that because Elijah probably ate this. Maybe even Jesus. Maybe even that one weird cousin who insists lentils are too pagan. Whatever his deal is, you ladle the bubbling mixture into wide, shallow bowls, and the steam rises with that earthy smell that makes your stomach rumble, even though you've been snacking on dates all afternoon. Historians still argue whether lentils were the staple or just the fallback when barley ran low. Some think chickpeas were more prized. Others point to archaeological remains showing lentil hulls scattered across ancient hearths like forgotten confetti. Either way, these legumes are your meat substitute on nights when fish didn't bite and the goat isn't milking. Everyone gathers around the low tabler flat stone slab or some reused wood balanced on baskets. No chairs. You squat or sit cross-legged on woven mats, your knees bumping into someone else's elbows, and no one really cares. Meals aren't quiet affairs. They're filled with the clink of pottery, the scrape of spoons, the quiet murmur of blessings. Someone always knocks over something. Tonight, it's your cousin. Again, you tear pieces of flatbread and use them like spoons. No one here really owns a spoon unless they're Roman, rich, or weird. You dip, scoop, and fold the stew into your bread, chewing slowly, letting the flavors unfold. Onion, garlic, lentilla trio that never fails. Occasionally, a wild card appears. Crushed olives, a streak of fermented turnip, or one of those dried desert herbs that taste like regret but cleans your sinuses. Meat is rare. When it's served, it's usually lamb or goat roasted, boiled or dried. But only on big occasions. Someone gets married? Meat. Someone dies? Also meat. Someone finally gets the roof fixed after 5 rainy seasons. Definitely meat. Tonight? No meat. You're not sad about it. Lentils do the job, and your cousin didn't oversalt it this time. You remember that one night when a traveling merchant passed through, bragging about having peacock meat in Jerusalem. You laughed so hard you nearly dropped your bowl. He claimed it was light, floral, and divine. You've had pigeon once. It was chewy, bony, and confusing. Alongside your stew, there's a dish of pickled onions, their vinegar sharp enough to sting your nose. Pickling is half the cuisine here. Everyone's grandmother has her own secret method. Yours uses clay pots, seawater, mustard seeds, and something she refuses to name. You suspect it's magic, or possibly fermented fig leaves. Another side dish tonight, crushed fava beans mixed with sesame oil. It's been sitting in a cool corner all day, thickening to a creamy, nutty paste. You smear it on warm bread, sprinkle it with za'atar, and sigh. It's rustic. It's satisfying. It sticks to your ribs and your memory. Some nights, dinner is followed by storytelling. Some nights, by arguing. Tonight, it's a quiet hum of conversation. Someone mentioning a prophet seen near Jericho, someone else worrying about Roman taxes going up again. You stare into your half-empty bowl, swirling the last few lentils like a lazy oracle reading bean-shaped rune. One kid complains that all they ever eat is mush. You remind him this mush is blessed. He rolls his eyes. You also did at his age. You still do when no one's looking. Someone brings out preserved turnips fermented, spicy, slightly sour. Not everyone's favorite, but it adds punch to the meal. The fermentation jars are lined up like soldiers in a shadowy corner, filled with pickled carrots, wild greens, and something you're pretty sure used to be radish. The house smells like vinegar half the year, and that's just tradition. Open debate still swirls among scholars whether ancient households followed rigid recipes or simply improvised with whatever grew nearby. The answer, you suspect, is yes. Recipes were more about rhythm than rules. You followed the seasons, the festivals, and your neighbors' panic when their grain spoiled too soon. Some nights a stew might be bulked with millet or crumbled cheese. Other nights, leftover stew becomes breakfast. That's called survival cuisine. And you're very familiar with it. As the fire burns low, someone breaks out a handful of dried apricots, a sweet end to a savory meal. It's not dessert in the modern Sensino cake, no sugar-glazed anything, but it's enough. Occasionally there's honey drizzled over cheese, but that's feast territory. You're lucky to nibble something sweet while the stew settles in your belly. You lean back on your hands, staring at the stars edging into the sky. Your stomach is full, your face warm from the fire, your tunic dotted with lentil specks you'll pretend not to notice. You exhale slowly. A sleepy dog curls up at your feet. Someone starts humming a tune older than anyone in the village, and you realize this kind of meal-quiet, communal, nourishing isn't about the ingredients, it's about the togetherness. About scraping the last of the stew from the pot while listening to someone tell a story that's probably half made up. About sharing what little you have with laughter and the occasional elbow to the ribs. About filling not just your belly but something deeper. You roll onto your side, eyes heavy, belly full of prophet stew and gratitude. Tomorrow night, maybe there'll be wine, maybe not. Either way, you'll be here. The sun has dipped behind the hills, but the village is glowing. Not from electric lights. Of course, those won't arrive for another 2,000 years, but from oil lamps, flickering on every stoop, every table, every crumbling windowsill. Somewhere, someone's singing off-key. Somewhere else, goats are arguing. But here in this little courtyard, it's celebration night. There's a wedding happening, and that means one thing above all else. Why? You step through the narrow alley toward the sound of music and clapping. Your sandals slap against the stone path, and the scent hits you before you even see the crowd wine, smoke, and freshly turned earth, with a note of something grill. You pass a young man awkwardly pouring sour wine from a clay jug into uneven cups. He sloshes a little on his tunic and laughs like it was intentional. The wine is red, sharp, and a little too warm, but no one minds. At a wedding feast, quantity trumps quality, mostly. The courtyard is packed with people dancers in flowing linen, older folks sipping from chipped cups, a toddler chewing on a date pit like it's treasure. You're handed a cup. It's not full because nothing ever is, and you take a sip. The wine has grit, literal grit. Maybe from the amphora it was stored in, maybe from the fact that filtering is for Roman snobs. Still, it's tart and alive, with a kick that softens your shoulders and makes the lute player sound slightly more in tune. Wine is the drink of the moment, the celebration, the covenant. It's everywhere and woven into everything. Religious rituals, wine. Temple offerings, wine. That guy trying to impress your cousin with poetry, wine. Your great-uncle's argument with a fig tree last year, definitely wine. And yet, it's not just about getting tipsy. Most families dilute their wine with water 2 or 3 parts water to 1 part wine because that stretches it, softens the bite, and honestly helps with the fact that half the time it's made in cracked clay pots. Some batches go a bit vinegary. Others develop a pleasant funk. A few turn into household cleaning fluid. It's a gamble. Historians still argue whether everyday wine was consumed plain or mixed with spices, resins, or honey. Some claim that mixing in herbs like rue or mint was common, especially at feasts. Others argue most wine was too rough to enjoy without tweaking. You've had all versions. The mint honey one was actually pretty decent. The fish spiced one? Unforgivable. Tonight, the bride and groom are seated on woven mats beneath a fabric canopy strung with wildflowers and thorn branches. It's rustic, symbolic, and slightly itchy. Everyone's eating from shared platters of dried fruit, lentil pastes, and years more of that sour wine. One older guest passes around roasted chickpeas seasoned with cumin. Another uncorks a tiny jar of thick grape syrup called Debash Anavimsweet, sticky, and poured over cheese like a drizzle of glory. The feast is humble by royal standards, but for this village, it's an event. Clay dishes piled high with barley cakes, roasted onions, stuffed grape leaves, the stuffing mostly grain, herbs, and wishful thinking, and the occasional salted fish to remind you this is still Galilee. You chew on something crispy and vaguely spiced and decide not to ask what it is. Tastes like fennel. Could be lizard. The firelight makes everything delicious. Then someone tells that story. The water into wine one. It's a crowd favorite Jesus at a wedding. The wine running out, his mother giving him that look, and then boom, miracle Merlot. You've heard it told reverently, sarcastically, dramatically, and once through interpretive dance. It always gets laughs followed by a few quiet nods. Whether you believe the tale or not, the message is clear. Wine isn't just drinker's blessing. Joy, celebration when things go right, and consolation when they don't. Someone hands you a second cup. You're not sure where the wine came from. It tastes better than the first. Someone whispers that it's miracle wine, and you nod politely, then immediately forget which jug it came from. Your uncle lifts his cup and starts quoting from the Psalms, wine gladdens the heart of man, but then loses his place and starts arguing with the neighbor about whether barley or wheat makes a better wedding cake. The answer, of course, is neither. There is no cake. There's honey-sweetened barley mush, molded into a lump and blessed by a priest who clearly knows it's not going to win awards. You nibble a bit anyway. It tastes like warm hope. A side dish appears pickled apples, sliced thin and served with crushed almonds. A rare treat. Another guest offers wine-soaked raisins rolled in sesame. Someone else brings out goat cheese cured in wine sediment. You don't know if it's fancy or accidental, but you eat it all the same. The music ramps up. A woman with wild hair starts dancing in spirals, arms raised, eyes half closed. You watch as a few elders join in, their movements slow but joyful. The rhythm of the drum is deep, slow, ancient like the heartbeat of the land itself. You tap your foot. Someone grabs your hand. Suddenly, you're in the circle, moving awkwardly but grinning anyway. Wine loosens the limbs and the mind. The stories grow taller. The fish get bigger. The miracles more specific. Someone swears they once saw a jug refill itself during a particularly enthusiastic Passover. No one questions it. As the night deepens, the lamps burn low, and the fire turns from crackling roar to sleepy glow. You sit cross-legged, wine cup in hand, watching sparks drift up into the stars. You're full not just of food, but of that full-belly peace that only comes when the people you love are loud and happy and nearby. The feast winds down with little ceremony. People slip off to their homes, some stay, curled up in cloaks near the coals. A jug of half-empty wine rests beside you, and someone has tucked a fig cake under a cloth for the morning. You lean back against a wall, eyes heavy, lips stained purple. The water may not have turned into wine tonight, but the wine turned into memories. That's miracle enough. The rooster doesn't care that you were up late at the wedding. He shouts his rude little song across the courtyard at dawn, like he's auditioning for prophet status. Your head acts not from too much wine, but from too much shouting over people drinking too much wine. You stretch beneath a scratchy wool blanket, and inhale the scent of morning firewood and yesterday's stew. Today is Sabbath Eve, and everything moves with a different rhythm. The air itself feels quieter, like the wind knows to hush. You shuffle into the kitchen alcove where your mother and aunt are already prepping food not for breakfast, but for tomorrow. Because when the sun sets tonight, the rules change. You've got to cook now. A lot. Enough to last through the sacred stillness of Shabbat. You start peeling onions with a flint-bladed knife that hasn't been sharp since Herod wore diapers. Someone else grinds chickpeas for hummus garbanzo, a thick paste of mashed legumes, garlic, sesame oil, and salt. It's tasty now, and even tastier tomorrow when the flavors have mingled overnight. This is ancient meal prep. Bread is baked in bulk today, maybe 10 rounds of flatbread, some plain, others mixed with herbs or a drizzle of olive oil and sprinkled sesame. A few loaves get set aside with extra care, wrapped in linen and tucked into a reed basket with a small clay cup of salt on top. That's for tomorrow's Sabbath table. You taste a spoonful of stewing lentils and promptly burn your tongue. The pot is heavy with onions, garlic, beans, and dried herbs thick and slow. Perfect for reheating later without losing flavor. It's your family's version of chaman, the slow-cooked stew that simmers quietly through the night so you don't break Sabbath by lighting a fire. Historians still argue whether chaman in this form existed in Jesus' day or developed later. Some evidence suggests Jews in the Second Temple period used a pre-Sabbath boiling method, burying pots in warm ash or embers to hold heat through Saturday. Others claim the ash cooking came later, but one thing's clear: no one risks cooking once the sun dips behind the hills. You can smell the anticipation. The rhythm of food shifts with the law. There are days for feasting, days for fasting, and days like tomorrow where you neither cook nor gather. You simply are. You bless. You eat slowly. You remember. Tonight's dinner will be plentiful. Shabbat is celebrated with full plates and full hearts. Goat cheese, lentils, olives, pickled everything, and always, always bread. You help your aunt fold grape leaves around herby rice, and she slaps your hand when you steal one. You call it taste testing. She calls it the reason we can't have nice things. Tomorrow you'll eat what you prepare today, which means tonight's prep is double time. A clay jar of wine is decanted and strained, as best as one can strain something that tastes like vinegar and fig juice. A platter of cucumbers and radishes is sliced and salted. Dates are stuffed with nuts. Pomegranates are split, their seeds scooped like rubies into shallow bowls. A thick yogurt is swirled with garlic and mint, so tangy it makes your mouth water just from looking at it. The sun lowers and the town stills. No more grinding, no more boiling, no more arguing about whether the stew needs more time. It does. Someone strikes flint for the last fire of the day. The flames glow warm, but they're not rushed. Tonight, everything must be ready before darkness. After that, you rest. At sundown, the first prayers are whispered. The blessings over bread and wine are murmured, slow and reverent, each syllable curling like steam into the quiet air. You sit with your family around the low table, lit by oil lamps and firelight, your hands resting on warm pottery and woven cloth. The air smells like herbs, yeast, and peace. You tear the bread slowly, dip it into hummus, eat pickled onions with salty olives. There's no hurry, no labor, just presence. The taste of rest. You glance at your cousin across the table. He's eating barley with yogurt and honey, a strange combo that somehow works. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Sabbath is the day to try things, he says. You nod, chewing. Good enough logic. Somewhere, a Roman patrol marches by. You hear the clank of armor, then silence. They don't interfere with the village on Sabbath. Not because they respect it, but because they know better than to rile up a people whose entire law system runs on rhythms older than the empire. Scholars often debate just how strictly Sabbath food rules were followed in every household. Some say urban Jews, especially in Jerusalem, had more elaborate customs. Others argue rural families like yours kept it simpler. What's consistent is the pattern, the pause, the deliberate distance from labor, and the food that had to bridge that gap. You lean back, belly full, eyelids heavy. The lamps flicker as the night deepens. No one reaches for seconds in a rush. No one clears the table. You'll do that tomorrow, long after the Sabbath's closing song is sung. On fast days, the pattern flips. Bread and salt, maybe water, maybe not. Yom Kippur isn't a food holiday, it's a hunger one. No stew, no wine, no figs to sneak under the table. Fasting is a spiritual act, but also a physical challenge. You remember last year's fast, your uncle hallucinated a roasted goat leg dancing through the air. You swore you smelled raisins in your dreams. There are other ritual meals too. Passover with bitter herbs and roasted lamb, festival bread twisted into spirals, dried fruits wrapped in fig leaves, every bite meaning something more than hunger. Tonight, though, you chew slowly. The Sabbath table isn't about miracles or performance. It's about stillness. It's about the bread you made this morning tasting like peace tonight. You wipe your fingers on a cloth. You whisper thanks. Tomorrow, the fire will stay cold, but the food will still be warm. The next day breaks gently, like a fig splitting open in the sun slow, warm, unbothered. The Sabbath still holds the village in its quiet grip, and you rise late, wrapped in a blanket that smells faintly of smoke and thyme. No chores today, no firewood to gather, no bread to bake, no fish to gut. Just you, your family, and yesterday's food, waiting under cloth wraps and clay lids, warmed by the memory of last night's fire. You sit by the cold hearth and unwrap a bowl of lentils. The stew has thickened overnight, like a sleepy bear settling into its cave. You don't heat it, you can't. Instead, you stir it slowly and eat it cool, the flavors mellow and deep, the garlic whispering instead of shouting. It's good, somehow better than when it was fresh. There's cold bread, slightly chewy, pickled carrots that have softened into tangy silk, a wedge of goat cheese, crumbly and sharp. You dip, chew, pass. Even in the quiet, the food talks. It says, you don't need fire to feel fed. Later, you wander outside the village. The roads are empty Sabbath rules. You follow an old footpath, worn smooth by sandal and story, until you reach a clearing by the edge of the wilderness. There's a low hum in the air. Bees, maybe. Or silence, doing its best impression of sound. And then you see it. A wild locust, clinging to a thorny branch like it owns the place. You stare at it, and it stares back, daring you to judge. You've heard the stories, John the Baptist, out here in the wild, living on locusts and wild honey. People call him mad, others call him holy. Either way, his diet is unforgettable. Locusts aren't just a last resort, they're kosher, believe it or not. Certain species, anyway. Leviticus gives them a grudging pass. You've tried them roasted before, crunchy, nutty, better than you'd expect if you don't look them in the eyes. Some folks say they taste like popcorn, others say they taste like sin. Either way, you don't ask too many questions when you're hungry. You crouch and scoop one into a cloth pouch. Might be useful later. There's a tree nearby low, gnarled, bleeding sap from a recent cut. A honey hive nestles in its crook, guarded by bees as casual as cats. You know better than to reach in, but someone clearly didn't. The hive's been tapped. A smear of golden sweetness trails down the bark. You lick your finger and taste it floral, wild, sticky as the desert heat. Historians still argue whether wild honey meant bee honey or date syrup in those wilderness references. Some claim it was more likely thickened fruit nectar, especially in the rocky Judean wilderness where actual beehives are rare. Others point to ancient texts that suggest honey hunting was a known, if slightly dangerous, art. Either way, the sweetness remains. You wander further. The desert stretches out like a cracked scroll, full of thorn bushes, wandering sheep, and the occasional prophet doing dramatic things on mountaintops. You imagine living out here full time. No bread, no wine, just roasted bugs and tree sap. It's a hard sell, but some do it. The Essenes, for one. A desert sect obsessed with purity, prophecy, and unseasoned legumes. They believe in cleansing of spirit, body, and probably palate. Their meals are sparse, often eaten in silence, broken only by whispered prayers. You visited once, they offered you a piece of flatbread so dry it could have doubled as a roof tile. You smiled, chewed, and politely buried the rest behind a rock when no one was looking. The wilderness has its own kind of food strange, sparse, symbolic. Wild herbs that burn your tongue but soothe your stomach. edible roots that take hours to find and minutes to regret. Once, you ate something called bitter broomley. Tasted like disappointment. But it helped with your cousin's stomach ache, so you call it a win. You think of Jesus again 40 days in this kind of wild. No bread, no fish, just fasting, temptation, and philosophical battles with the devil. You last 40 minutes out here before deciding your stomach needs theology with a side of figs. You head back toward the village, sun high now, skin prickled with heat. You pass a shepherd chewing on a carob pod. He offers you one, grinning with brown-stained teeth. Carob the chocolate of the ancient world. Dry, earthy, a little sweet if you chew long enough. You nod thanks, bite down, and spend the next hour trying to convince your mouth it liked it. Back in town, Sabbath is still lingering like incense smoke. Your mother's laid out the evening meal, the last of the bread, olives swimming in oil, a few crumbles of soft cheese, and surprise fig cake saved from earlier. You sit down, wash your hands with cool water, and eat slowly, mindfully, every bite grounding you. Tomorrow the fire returns. The knives sharpen, the wheat grinds, the stew simmers. But tonight you rest with honey still on your tongue. And now, as the last of the fig cake crumbles between your fingers, the lamps begin to flicker low. You lie back on your mat, belly full, ears echoing with the memory of laughter and drums, and outside, the stars bloom across the black sky like glowing pomegranate seeds. You feel the stillness settle into your bones, the quiet of a people who live by rhythm, the planting, the harvesting, the preparing, the waiting. Every meal a mirror of the season, every bite tied to a prayer, a story, a silence. The lentils that warmed your soul, the fish that tied you to the lake, the bread that crackled on stones at Dornell, still alive inside you. You close your eyes, and the hum of the desert breeze becomes the crackle of yesterday's fire. The sweetness of figs and dates still lingers faintly on your tongue, like a whispered lullaby, the taste of a world that worked with what it had, that prayed over its barley, that found flavor in simplicity, that shared everything, even when there wasn't much. In the distance, a dog barks once. A clay jar shifts in the night wind, and you, stretched out under a linen sheet, smile quietly into the dark. You've tasted the life of the ancient. You've walked barefoot through their bread fields and fruit groves. You've sat at their Sabbath table, and now, wrapped in that timeless warmth, you drift into sleep. Shalom, friend. May your dreams be as sweet as honey.